August 1977, Enfield, England. The house at 284 Green Street looked like any other in the quiet North London neighborhood, modest, worn, unremarkable. Inside lived a single mother, Peggy Hodgson, and her 4 children, Margaret, Janet, Johnny, and Billy. Life wasn't easy, but it was peaceful until one night when everything changed. It started with a strange noise. Janet, just 11 years old, told her mother, "The chest of drawers is moving, it's sliding on its own." Peggy, annoyed, walked in to scold her children for playing games, but as she entered the room, she saw it too. The heavy chest moved again, slowly, forcefully. Peggy tried to push it back against the wall. It wouldn't budge, as if someone was holding it in place. And then a loud knock echoed through the room, and another, and another. From that night forward, the haunting began. What followed defied belief. Furniture was tossed across the room, toys flew through the air, knocking, banging, and scratching sounds echoed through the house at night. Janet would wake up speaking in a deep, growling voice, a voice that wasn't hers. Sometimes she'd be found levitating above her bed, screaming in terror. One night, the neighbors saw her appear at an upstairs window, only to vanish a second later. The family, terrified and desperate, called the police. The investigation. A police constable witnessed a chair slide across the floor by itself. She wrote it down in her report but couldn't explain it. Then came the paranormal investigators, including Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair from the Society for Psychical Research. They recorded hours of audio, took hundreds of photos, and interviewed the family extensively. On one recording, Janet, while supposedly asleep, spoke in a male voice saying, "My name is Bill, I lived here before, I died in that chair." Later, a man named Bill Wilkins was identified, a former resident who had died in that very house, in the exact chair Janet mentioned. Hoax or haunting? Some skeptics believe Janet was faking it. But if she was, how could she speak in that deep voice for hours without hurting her throat? How did she know details of a dead man's life? The investigators insisted there is no explanation for what we saw. Something real was happening in that house. The haunting slowly faded after 2 years. Janet grew up, left the house, and later admitted she had faked some of the events, but not all. To this day, she insists. Not everything was fake. Most of it was real. Something was there. Legacy. The Enfield case became the inspiration for movies like The Conjuring 2 and countless documentaries. It remains one of the most thoroughly documented paranormal cases in modern history. And if you walk past 284 Green Street today, you might never guess the terror it once held. But those who lived through it, they never forgot. February 1st, 1959, Ural Mountains, Soviet Union. The snowstorm had worsened. Blinding winds howled across the icy slopes of Mount Kholat-Shakhl, a name that meant Mountain of the Dead in the local Mansi language. Inside a large tent pitched on a steep mountainside, Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student and experienced hiker, looked at his group, 9 of them in total, all young, strong, and full of life. They laughed, wrote in their journals, and warmed their hands near a small stove. It was supposed to be just another night, but something, no one knows what, changed everything. Hours later, the tent was torn from the inside. The group had fled barefoot, wearing only thin clothes, into the darkness, into the 30-degree-C snow. Why? Days later, rescue teams arrived. What they found chilled them more than the cold. The tent stood on the slope, slashed open from within. Footprints led down the hill, barefoot or in socks. 2 bodies were found near the forest by the remains of a campfire. 3 more lay frozen in poses, suggesting they were trying to crawl back to the tent. Then came the others. One man's skull was cracked open. Another's chest was crushed with force like a car crash, yet no bruises on the skin. Ludmila, one of the women, was missing her tongue and eyes. No sign of a struggle, no wild animals, no avalanche debris, and the snow was silent. Theories flooded in. Avalanche? Experts said no. The slope was wrong and the tent had not been buried. Secret military tests? Some believed the area was used for weapons experiments. UFOs? Locals saw strange orange lights in the sky that same night. Paranormal forces? The name of the mountain, Death, seemed too fitting. The Soviet investigation quietly ended. The official cause? A compelling natural force that the hikers could not overcome. No further explanation. The case was buried. Today, decades later, investigators still revisit the case. Books, documentaries, and films have tried to uncover the truth. But the cold never speaks, and what happened that night on Dyatlov Pass remains one of the greatest unsolved horrors of the 20th century. A real mystery, a real nightmare. Be careful where you camp, especially on the Mountain of the Dead. In January 1971, Roger and Carolyn Perron moved into a beautiful, centuries-old farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island with their 5 daughters Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April. It was meant to be a peaceful place where they could raise their family. But almost immediately after moving in, strange things began to happen. At first it was subtle. Brooms moved from one room to another, small piles of dirt appeared on the clean kitchen floor, and the girls claimed to hear whispering at night. Then the activity escalated. Doors slammed shut on their own, beds shook in the middle of the night, disembodied voices echoed through the hallways. The family often smelled the scent of rotting flesh, though nothing was there. One of the girls even said she saw a floating figure of a woman in a gray dress, staring at her from the corner of her room. The Perrons soon realized they were not alone. According to Carolyn, the house was haunted by several spirits, but the most terrifying of them all was a woman named Bathsheba Sherman, who had lived in the area in the 1800s. Legend had it that Bathsheba was a witch who had sacrificed her infant child in a ritual and cursed the land before hanging herself from a tree behind the house. Carolyn began to experience physical attacks, bruises, scratches, and sudden fainting. She felt targeted by the dark presence, as if Bathsheba was trying to possess her or drive her away. Terrified and desperate, the Perrons reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren, famous paranormal investigators. Lorraine, a clairvoyant, said she sensed intense evil in the house and believed Bathsheba's spirit was indeed targeting Carolyn. The Warrens attempted a seance to communicate with the spirits. During the ritual, Carolyn's body was violently thrown across the room. The event traumatized the family, especially the children, and they begged the Warrens to stop. Despite the paranormal chaos, the parents couldn't afford to leave. They stayed in the house for nearly 10 years, enduring constant fear and unexplained horrors. Eventually, they moved out in 1984. The hauntings seemed to end once they were gone. To this day, the house at 1677 Round Top Road is infamous. Later owners have reported strange activity, and the story remains one of the most terrifying and documented hauntings in American history. In June 2014, Derek and Maria Broaddus were thrilled. They had just bought their dream home in the quiet town of Westfield, New Jersey, a beautiful 6-bedroom house at 657 Boulevard, perfect for their family. But their excitement didn't last long. Just days after closing the deal, Derek checked the mailbox. Among the usual junk mail, he found a white envelope addressed simply to the new owner. There was no return address. The letter inside was strange and disturbing. Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. The letter continued with personal details about the Broaddus family, their names, how many kids they had, and where they spent their time in the house. The writer knew everything. I see you've already started renovations. The house is crying from all the noise. Have you found what's in the walls yet? In time you will. Shocked and frightened, the Broadduses contacted the police immediately. The letter had no fingerprints and there were no leads. A few weeks later, another letter arrived. I am pleased to know your names now and the name of the young blood you have brought to me. You have children. I have seen them. So far, I think there are 3 that I have counted. Are there more on the way? Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? The family stopped sleeping in the house. They were too terrified. Each letter became more threatening, more detailed. The watcher claimed their grandfather had watched the house in the 1920s and their father in the 1960s. Now it was their turn. Despite extensive investigations, no one was ever caught. The Broadduses never officially moved in. They rented the house for a time but couldn't sell it easily. The story had made national headlines. Some people thought it was a hoax. Others believed it was a neighbor jealous of the beautiful home. But the fear felt by the family was real. To this day, the identity of the watcher remains a mystery.